13 R&B legends. 13 songs you already know by heart, from cookouts, weddings, slow dances, and 2 a.m. drives home. But almost none of you know how the story behind the voice actually ended. Because behind every one of these hits is a fall nobody put in the liner notes. A bullet, a bottle, a betrayal, a plane that never should have taken off. And tonight we're not skipping a single detail. I'm your host, and this is R&BGROOVELore. Welcome back, family. If you're new here, we dig through the archives so the truth doesn't disappear with the record. So let's get into it. Number 13, Casanova, Gerald Levert.
A woman just like you in my life.
Before Gerald Levert ever wrote a hit, he was already royalty. His father was Eddie Levert, the golden voice of the OJs. And in 1983, 17-year-old Gerald put together a group in Shaker Heights, Ohio, with his brother Sean and their childhood friend Mark Gordon. They called it Levert. By 1987, Casanova was everywhere, a smooth, confident groove that shot straight to #1 on the R&B charts and turned Gerald into the new face of grown folks' soul. He wasn't just Eddie Levert's son anymore. He was his own name.
Gonna say it to you time and time again.
But the pain medication started after a torn Achilles tendon and shoulder surgery. Vicodin, Percocet, Darvocet, stacked with Xanax for his anxiety. And on November 10, 2006, at just 40 years old, Gerald Levert was found dead in his Ohio home. The coroner called it acute intoxication, an accident, not an overdose in the way people assume, just a body that simply couldn't hold any more.
Just see how much I really love you.
16 months later, his brother Sean died too, after a medical emergency in a jail cell. And if you've ever watched a family's music become a family's mourning, you understand why nobody in Shaker Heights plays Casanova the same way anymore. Number 12, Living All Alone, Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman had a voice that could fill an opera house, a rich, aching contralto that earned her a Theatre World Award on Broadway in Sophisticated Ladies before she ever cracked the pop charts. She was, by every account, one of the most technically gifted singers of her generation. In 1986, Living All Alone became her signature, ironic, devastating, and true, because underneath the poise, Phyllis was fighting battles nobody in the audience could see. Bipolar disorder, alcohol, a body image the industry never let her rest from. In 1993, her close friend and songwriter Linda Creed died. Then, within 1 month, Phyllis lost both her mother and her grandmother. She kept recording anyway. She kept performing anyway. But on June 30th, 1995, just hours before she was scheduled to headline the Apollo Theater, Phyllis Hyman took her own life with an overdose of sleeping pills, leaving behind a note that read simply, "I'm tired. I'm tired." She was 45 years old, 1 week short of her birthday. And if you've ever smiled through an audience while breaking apart backstage, you already understand the loneliness in that song's title.
Oh, I don't want.
Number 11, At Last, Etta James. Every wedding in America has played At Last. Etta James's 1961 masterpiece is basically the national anthem of falling in love. But Etta's own story was anything but a fairy tale.
found a thrill.
Born to a 14-year-old mother, raised by a rotating cast of caretakers, Etta was a prodigy who by her 20s was one of the biggest names in R&B and blues, and also deep into a heroin addiction that would follow her for over a decade. Arrests, rehab stints, forgery charges just to fund the habit.
My love has come.
She survived it, clean for decades. But the damage lingered. Diabetes, kidney failure. Then, in 2010, leukemia and dementia that made her say things in interviews she'd later regret, including a public feud with Beyoncé after the 2009 inauguration.
That I could speak to.
Etta James died on January 20th, 2012, 3 days shy of her 74th birthday. Complications from a disease that had been quietly building for years, because sometimes the fall isn't sudden. Sometimes it's just decades finally catching up.
You are mine.
Number 10. If You Think You're Lonely Now, Bobby Womack.
Well, you gave me room.
Bobby Womack learned everything from Sam Cooke: how to phrase a lyric, how to work a crowd, how to own a room. Cooke even signed Bobby's family group, the Valentinos, to his own label when Bobby was still a teenager.
Who are you holding?
Then, on December 11th, 1964, Sam Cooke was shot and killed at a Los Angeles motel. Just 3 months later, 21-year-old Bobby Womack married Cooke's grieving widow, Barbara, and the industry never fully forgave him for it. Black radio stations pulled his records. Cooke's own brothers reportedly beat him up in Chicago. His solo career practically had to start over from zero.
But I ain't there to rub your back. Just remember.
He clawed his way back with 1981's If You Think You're Lonely Now, proving the voice was still one of the great instruments in soul music. But the 80s brought a serious drug addiction that nearly finished what the scandal started.
Wait until tonight.
He got clean, kept recording, and even staged a genuine comeback in his 60s, until colon cancer and an Alzheimer's diagnosis caught up with him. Bobby Womack died peacefully in his sleep on June 27, 2014, at 70 years old, a man who spent 50 years trying to outrun one decision made when he was barely old enough to make it. Number 9. Super Freak, Rick James.
She will never let your spirits down.
Super Freak turned Rick James into a household name in 1981. The bass line alone built an entire genre of funk, and a decade later, MC Hammer would resurrect it inside You Can't Touch This, proving the groove was basically bulletproof.
I really love to taste her.
Rick, on the other hand, was not. By his own estimate, he was spending $7,000 a week on cocaine at the height of his addiction, and in 1984 he was hospitalized after being found unconscious from a drug binge on a friend's floor. That was just the warning shot.
Backstage with her girlfriends in a limousine.
In 1993, a jury convicted him on assault and torture charges tied to 2 separate incidents involving women held against their will during cocaine binges with his then-girlfriend. He served 2 years in Folsom State Prison, a stunning fall for a Grammy-winning icon of funk.
Yeah.
He got out, got soberish, tried to rebuild, but the damage to his heart was already done. On August 6, 2004, Rick James was found dead in his Los Angeles home at 56. The coroner's report later confirmed 9 different drugs in his system at the time of a fatal heart attack, a body that had simply been pushed too far for too long. Number 8. Close the Door, Teddy Pendergrass.
I wanna give it all to you.
Teddy Pendergrass didn't just sing love songs. He was the first black male solo artist in history to release 5 consecutive platinum albums. And when Close the Door dropped in 1978, women reportedly threw their room keys on stage. He was, without exaggeration, one of the biggest sex symbols in music.
Come on, get closer and closer, so close to me.
Then, in the early morning hours of March 18th, 1982, Pendergrass lost control of his Rolls-Royce on a Philadelphia road, hit a barrier, and slammed into a tree. His neck was broken. At just 31 years old, Teddy Pendergrass would never walk again.
Give it up, set it out, let me have it, give it up.
The recovery was brutal. He refused rehab at first and reportedly considered suicide. But 3 years later, in 1985, he returned to a stage at Live Aid, performing from his wheelchair to a standing ovation that still gets replayed today.
And it's exactly like I thought it would.
He kept recording for another 2 decades, proving the voice never actually left him. But colon cancer surgery in 2009 was one fight too many. Teddy Pendergrass died on January 13th, 2010, at 59, a man who lost his legs but never once lost his sound.
Come here, baby. Lay your head.
Real talk before we keep going. Building this channel takes hours of digging through obituaries, court records, and old interviews just to get one story right. Because these artists deserve more than a caption on an old photo. If that means something to you, hit subscribe. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it's the only reason more people find these stories at all. All right, back to the countdown.
Close the door. No need to worry.
Number 7. You're the first, the last, my everything. Barry White.
My last, my everything.
That bass. You know the bass before you even hear the lyrics. Barry White's voice was so deep, it practically became its own instrument. And You're the First, the Last, My Everything made him the maestro of romance for an entire decade. The walrus of love, who scored more candlelit dinners than anyone in music history.
They could have made two.
But that same larger-than-life body carried the weight of chronic hypertension for years. Hospitalizations in 1995 and 1998 were early warnings that mostly got ignored, the way warnings often do when the shows keep selling out.
You're my reality. Yet
By September 2002, the hypertension had destroyed his kidneys. Barry went on dialysis, waiting for a transplant that never came in time. In May 2003, a massive stroke left him unable to perform at all, ending, for good, one of the most recognizable voices in music.
you're my son.
Barry White died on July 4th, 2003, at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. 58 years old, kidney failure the official cause, and somehow, the man whose voice sounded like it could outlast anything, couldn't outlast his own heart.
That's what you are.
Number 6. Never Too Much. Luther Vandross.
Fantasy. There's not a minute, hour, day, or night.
Luther Vandross had, arguably, the most technically flawless voice R&B ever produced. Never Too Much, in 1981, didn't just launch a career, it set the bar every runner-up ballad singer has been chasing for 40 years since.
I'm daydreaming, planning how to say I love you.
Behind the perfect runs, though, Luther spent his whole life locked in a battle with his weight. Losses and gains of over 100 pounds, cycle after cycle, tied to years of hypertension and undiagnosed diabetes that the industry treated like a punchline instead of a warning sign. On April 16, 2003, that warning sign became a catastrophe. A massive stroke left Luther unable to speak, unable to perform, unable to do the one thing that had defined his entire existence. He spent nearly 2 years fighting to recover, even accepting Grammy Awards from a wheelchair, his voice reduced to a whisper. Luther Vandross died on July 1st, 2005, at 54 years old, from complications tied to that stroke. And if you've ever heard someone say, a singer's voice was a gift from God, Luther's story is the reminder that the body carrying that gift was still painfully, achingly human. Number 5. A Song for You, Donny Hathaway.
And I was singing this song.
Donny Hathaway didn't write A Song for You, but his 1971 live version is the one most singers still study today, a masterclass in restraint that turned a Leon Russell B-side into a soul standard.
If my words don't come together.
What most fans never knew was that Donny was privately battling paranoid schizophrenia, hospitalizations that came and went, medication he'd sometimes skip, delusions that would surface without warning even during his most productive sessions.
I sung a lot of songs.
On January 13th, 1979, while recording a duet album with his longtime partner Roberta Flack at New York's Essex House Hotel, Donny began acting erratically enough that the session had to end early. Hours later, he was found dead on the sidewalk 15 floors below his hotel window.
Can't you see through me?
Police ruled it a suicide. The glass had been carefully removed, no signs of struggle, but his family never fully accepted that explanation, and to this day some insist it may have been an accident, a man simply opening a window the way he always did. Donny Hathaway was 33 years old, and Roberta Flack finished their album without him.
In there, hiding.
Number 4. Rock the Boat, Aaliyah. Aaliyah had just wrapped filming her music video for Rock the Boat on Abaco Island in the Bahamas. 22 years old, 3 albums deep, already being called the future of R&B, when her team boarded a small charter plane on the evening of August 25th, 2001, to head home to Miami. The Cessna 402B was carrying 8 passengers and a plane full of video equipment, roughly 700 pounds over its certified weight limit. The pilot, Luis Morales, had been hired only 2 days earlier and, investigators later confirmed, wasn't even certified to fly that particular aircraft. Less than a minute after takeoff, the plane went down. All 9 people on board, Aaliyah, her hairstylist, her bodyguard, and label staff, were killed instantly. A toxicology report later found cocaine and alcohol in the pilot's system. She was buried 9 days later in Manhattan. 22 white doves released for every year of her life. And if you've ever wondered why so many artists still name-check her 2 decades later, it's because Rock the Boat wasn't supposed to be a farewell. It was supposed to be the beginning of something even bigger. Number 3. A Change Is Gonna Come, Sam Cooke.
Oh, yes it will.
Sam Cooke wrote, "A change is gonna come," after being turned away from a whites-only motel in Louisiana. A song so quietly powerful, it became one of the defining anthems of the entire civil rights movement, released just weeks after his death.
It's been too hard living.
Because on December 11th, 1964, Sam Cooke was shot and killed at a rundown Los Angeles motel by the manager, Bertha Franklin, who claimed self-defense after a struggle. The circumstances were murky from the start, Cooke had been with a woman named Aaliyah Boyer, who fled the room before the shooting, and the story she told police never fully lined up.
Back down on my knees.
An inquest ruled it justifiable homicide in less than a day, a decision that, to this moment, Cooke's family and countless historians believe was rushed, incomplete, and shaped by exactly who Sam Cooke was in 1964 America.
Long time coming, but I know.
He was 33 years old, at the absolute commercial peak of his career, one of the first black artists to control his own record label and publishing. And the song that became his legacy, the one about change finally coming, he never once got to hear it on the radio.
Oh, yes it will.
Number 2. What's Going On? Marvin Gaye.
Talk to me, honey, so you can see.
What's Going On wasn't supposed to happen. Motown's Berry Gordy hated the demo, called it uncommercial, and told Marvin Gaye not to release it. Marvin released it anyway, in 1971, and it became the album that redefined what soul music was even allowed to say out loud.
Hey, what's going on? Tell me what.
But behind the artistic triumph, Marvin was falling apart. Cocaine addiction, crushing tax debt to the US government, a self-imposed exile to Europe just to escape his own creditors. By 1983, he'd clawed back with sexual healing, but the drugs and the paranoia never fully let go.
Oh, what's going on? What's going.
He moved into his parents' Los Angeles home to recover, but the relationship with his father, Marvin Gaye Sr., had been violent and strained since childhood. On April 1st, 1984, one single day before his 45th birthday, an argument between his parents escalated. Marvin intervened, and his father shot him twice with a gun Marvin himself had given him months earlier.
Talk to me, honey, so you.
He was pronounced dead within the hour. His father later pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter and received probation, no prison time at all. Marvin Gaye asked the world what was going on, and the answer, in the end, came from inside his own house.
What's going on? Woo!
Number 1. I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston's 1992 cover of I Will Always Love You became the best-selling single by a woman in music history at the time. A vocal performance so towering, it's still used as the gold standard in every singing competition on television. But by the mid-90s, the woman with arguably the greatest voice of her generation was locked in a very public battle with cocaine addiction, a turbulent marriage to Bobby Brown, and a media narrative that turned every stumble into a headline instead of a cry for help. She fought for sobriety more than once. There were real comeback moments, real flashes of that voice returning. But the years of substance abuse had already taken a physical toll that no amount of willpower alone could reverse.
We'll always love you.
On February 11th, 2012, the night before the Grammy Awards, Whitney Houston was found unresponsive in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The coroner ruled it an accidental drowning, with heart disease and cocaine use listed as contributing factors. She was 48 years old, and to this day, nobody has come close to matching that voice. Not one time. 13 legends. 13 songs that outlived the people who made them. If one of these stories hit different tonight, tell me which one down in the comments. And if this is your first time here, hit subscribe, because R&BGROOVELore isn't done digging. There's always one more story the industry tried to bury under the hit song.